say at one point that the Big Bang doesn't explain the origin of the universe. Now, most people assume it does. How can you possibly say the Big Bang doesn't explain the origin of the universe?
Kind of a strange thing to think about, but with the Big Bang, in fact, the Big Bang initially was drafted to try to explain the origin of the universe apart from God. So it's interesting when Christians want to say that God used the Big Bang, but apart from that, it doesn't really explain the origin of the universe in that it doesn't start with nothing and then explode into something. They say that perhaps everything in the known universe was squished down into a little speck maybe the size of an electron, and it was just sitting there. It wasn't sitting there in space because space didn't exist. It wasn't sitting there in time because time didn't even exist. It's just sitting there. And they call it a singularity, something that doesn't play well with the known laws of physics. And it's also a thermodynamic dead end. It's not going anywhere. It's stuck. They tell us the Big Bang is the event that got it unstuck somehow. It's this magical event that took the speck and then unstuck it and starts expanding it. And as it expands, it starts creating space and it creates time to try to explain how the universe got here apart from God. So again, it doesn't really make sense for Christians to say, well, God used the Big Bang, because it's a naturalistic explanation. And the physics behind it really isn't good. There are a lot of problems we'll probably skip for the show today with red shifts and expansion.
I am curious, as you say that, yeah, I'm curious, isn't the reason they're looking for the Higgs boson and these hydrogen colliders, isn't the whole reason they're trying to look for what happened to that singularity, or one of the things they're looking for?
Part of it, they're trying to find the particle that they think should exist that would give mass to all the other particles. They're not quite sure how do these other particles have mass, and they think maybe there's a particle like the Higgs boson that would exist. So they're looking for it, and they think they found evidence that it actually does exist. That doesn't prove that evolution is true. It doesn't prove that there was a Big Bang. It doesn't disprove the Bible at all. It's an interesting theory in physics, and maybe they found some evidence of something that would give mass to some other particles.
All right, sorry for the distraction. Back to the show.
I mean, their math that they've done is pretty sophisticated on various things, but what we're basically saying is that just this fraction, a few billionths of a second after when they think the universe began, they've got no explanation for that first little bit. They can't, no math that they've got can explain that at all. None of their physics principles or anything can explain.
Do you think that they can explain even up to that? I've heard that though, when they say, you know, we know what happened, what took place to a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second of the Big Bang. I mean, we can get right there to the edge of time, but we just don't know what quite triggered it. Can they really get to that?
Not really. It sounds very impressive, and the more detailed they get, the more impressive it sounds, and the less people want to argue with it. You think, wow, these guys are so smart. But again, we're talking about historical science, making guesses as to what happened in the past, and the more detail they come up with, the more people kind of back off and think, wow, they're so smart, just can't argue with it. But it really isn't the same thing as, again, making cell phones and curing diseases that we do in the laboratory today.
It's not just a mathematical calculation that, hey, there's the numbers, obviously the Big Bang happened, and here we can prove it.
They're working very, very hard at finding an explanation, and some of it's sincere. They just are not going to involve God. That's their worldview, and so they're trying to find some natural explanation of how it might have happened without there being any supernatural forces. So they're working hard at doing that because they're never going to come to the conclusion that maybe God did something.
Which is the wrong presupposition to start with, and it's an illogical presupposition to start with.